Man, I've screwed up so many drafts in my life. I mean, to the point where I'm making mistakes that I didn't even know were mistakes at the time. I'm Dave Loughran with Awesemo.com. We're getting personal today. I'm going to break down all the mistakes that I've made drafting and hopefully help you avoid all of those going into your drafts. Because I get it. It's fun to draft. We like hanging out. Maybe you're doing in-person drafts again this year, getting a little bit tuned up. I get it. It's enjoyable. But what it all comes down to is not only winning money and having fun. You want to win money, you want to have fun. You want to win money more than you want to have fun, but you also want to be able to talk shit on your friends, hold that title for a full year, right? That's what's important about all of this. So hopefully this video is exactly what you need. I think it will be. 10 draft mistakes to avoid in 2021. Take these strategies with you into the draft room and make some money, and also get those bragging rights. But one more thing, can you do me a solid? It only takes 1 second, maybe less than a second, to hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. It would be greatly appreciated. I thank you for that in advance. Now let's win some damn money. The first mistake on the list is considering players undraftable. I see people do this all the time, and it doesn't make sense. Now look, yeah, do I have some clickbaity titles at times with still phenomenal content? Yeah, maybe I'll have a do not draft graphic up there on the thumbnail. You got to do that. It's YouTube. You guys understand. But whenever you dive into those videos, I always tell you at the top, when I say do not draft, I don't mean do not draft at all. I mean do not draft at the ADP. That's huge, because if a guy falls far enough, you're getting phenomenal value on it. And as a matter of fact, if you know your league well, right? If you know how your league operates, you've been doing it for a while, even if you don't, but you see trends beginning to happen, that can present the biggest opportunities in the draft. Like, let me give you a good example. Tyreek Hill a few years ago, you could have got him in the middle rounds. I saw him go even later than that at times because people were so concerned about the looming or potential suspension. Boom, Tyreek Hill comes out, huge season, doesn't miss any time, and you're in great shape. This year, for example, Saquon Barkley, I did a spot on him saying don't draft him. But I was saying don't draft him at his ADP. This was a couple weeks ago when we were getting all this word, and he was 5th. He had the top 5 ADP. Now I'm seeing Barkley fall out of the first round. If I could get Barkley outside of the first round, who has legitimate league-winning upside, give me that all day long. Michael Thomas is another example. What about him? You've got him going. I mean, I did a draft, a mock draft, and we'll get to this later in the video, about 2 weeks ago on Yahoo, and Michael Thomas was around at like the 120 ADP. I didn't even take him. I wanted to see how long he would go for. He just kept sitting there. Nobody wanted to take him. If you could get Michael Thomas, assuming he doesn't go crazy and doesn't get traded and is healthy by late October, and you get 10 games out of Thomas, you're getting him in double-digit rounds. That's absurd value there. So no player should ever be viewed as undraftable. View them as undraftable at their ADP, sure, but if they fall far enough, look at that as an opportunity, as value, and not someone that you need to stay away from throughout the entire draft. The second mistake on my list, and this is another huge one, is not being flexible, having no flexibility, not being willing to change up your strategy into the draft. We all go into a draft with a certain idea of what we want to do. That's totally understandable. I do the same thing, right? Like, I know what rosters I think look best when I'm talking, standard redraft or PPR redraft leagues, half point PPR, even super flex or tight end premium, whatever it is, best ball leagues as well. But sometimes you're going to get thrown a curveball. Sometimes people are going to draft players. They're going to reach heavily on players. We'll get to that too. And you're going to be left sitting there being like, man, I really wanted 2 early running backs, but here I have Devontae Adams sitting at the 11th overall pick, or Travis Kelce. I don't like drafting early tight ends, but here's Travis Kelce at the end of the first round, who's legitimately one of the best overall fantasy producers in the league, regardless of position. Those are spots that if you get the opportunity to take it, you gotta grab it. You can't go into something and say, well, I really wanted a second running back here, but all the guys I loved are gone, but I still think I need to go running back heavy to start the draft because that's what people on the internet tell me to do. So what I'm going to do is I'll take a guy with a 3rd round ADP in the earlier mid-second. Don't do that, right? These ADPs generally get pretty sharp. Use aggregate ADPs if you have to, right? Aggregate them from a bunch of different spots. You can do that in a number of areas. And look at those ADPs and figure out where the good spots are. but don't ever refuse to be flexible in these drafts. Don't ever go in with an approach, with a strategy that you're unwilling to budge from, even if the league is gifting you amazing players on a platter each and every round. The third mistake is one that a lot of people already know about, but I'll give you a refresher because not everybody has time to sit around and research fantasy football in the months or weeks leading up to their draft. And this video is for you, right? You have to be willing to draft bench players before you fill your starting lineup, okay? And I'm not just talking about don't draft a kicker to fill out your starting lineup or a defense. You should know that already. I mean, that's as simple as it gets. Kicker's a super volatile position. So is defense. Take shots on guys that are in really high upside spots where other people might be drafting a defense or a kicker. I actually sometimes in leagues that allow it, I will finish a draft without drafting a kicker or a defense because training camp might still be happening. Preseason might still be happening. If that's not the case, then don't do that. But if you're drafting while the preseason's still happening or while we're still in training camp, go ahead and just forego those positions altogether. Load up on as many speculative plays as you can get and see what they do in the preseason. See what they do in training camp. Then, before the season kicks off, drop whoever you need to, add whatever kicker you want, and stream defenses throughout the year. That's such a big thing. Just be willing to stream defenses. You do it with quarterbacks, right? Where you take a guy on a bye week or maybe you just don't have great quarterback play and there's a lot of good ones on the waiver wire. You stream them. Why not stream defenses? Every week, there's at least one defense with a good enough matchup that you can scoop them up, throw them into your lineup, and not think about it again. It's that simple. But in terms of filling out your roster, your starting lineup, I'm not just talking about kicker and defense. I'm also talking about people being unwilling to draft, say, a bench player before they fill their tight end spot. So you think about it. If it comes up and there's a big dead zone with tight end, okay, after, there's like Hawkinson and there's Goddard and it turns into a dead zone. A Higbee I like as well, but you will have a dead zone. If you didn't get to anybody yet, wait on the position and load up on as many players as you can on your bench. Now, I'm not saying don't draft a tight end till the last round, but wait till you have a good spot. Don't reach on a tight end just because you need to fill that spot in your starting lineup where there's guys with much higher upside, higher floor, more consistency, all of that stuff that are ultimately going to be more valuable to your team than a low rate tight end that you just feel like needs to be in that starting lineup. The fourth mistake is taking on too much early round risk. You always hear you can't win without taking risks. You can't win a championship without taking risks. That's accurate, but you don't need to take those risks in the first round. You don't need to take those risks in the second round. There are so many good players in these early rounds that what is the point of saying, man, if this guy pops off this season, I'm going to win? Yeah, same with all of the other guys that are being drafted around him that are almost certain to pop off, barring an injury or suspension or something like that. Take a ton of risk late in the draft where you already have a ton of speculative players. That's the place to do it. Grab a bunch of players that could be in really good spots, that could be your full-time starters come week 3 or week 4. Do that later in the draft or even in the middle late rounds, but not early in the draft. It's so often that people do that and wonder why they're losing. It's because you're grabbing speculative players that we haven't seen do much, and we have no idea if they have that purely definitive role that all of the guys around them do, and then you're surprised when they're not good. Just avoid that. You can take plenty of risk late in the drafts, and that's so much more valuable to bolstering a monster roster that's going to put you in the championship. Mistake number 5, reaching on players or being an outright homer. I get that it's fun to have players on your home team that you root for. Totally makes sense to me. But one approach to take here, and I would recommend this to anybody that's like, yeah, but I do this for fun. I don't need the money. The bragging rights are cool, but I do this for fun and I like to root for my guys. I get that, but you still want to win, right? So the best approach for me, if I'm telling somebody else how to go about this, would be wait on a guy and draft some sleepers on your team that could have big seasons. A good example would be instead of taking CeeDee Lamb or Amari Cooper, who, by the way, I love both of them, but instead of reaching, well, I love CeeDee Lamb. I don't love Amari Cooper this year, not at his ADP. Instead of reaching on CeeDee Lamb, Because say you're in Texas, and by the way, super unfortunate if you're a Cowboys fan, but that's the way it goes. Say you're in Texas, right? And this is a bunch of Cowboys fans drafting, and you know that they're going to go higher than they should because their ADP is already really high. Let someone else have them, and then grab Michael Gallup later, right? Maybe Michael Gallup will go too early too, but even if he does, forget about it. There's so many good options surrounding them anyway, but wait on them. Take one later in the draft on your team. And you know what? Maybe they have a quality season and you could still root for them. But either way, reaching on players can put you in a lot of trouble. You could love somebody and still get them ahead of their ADP, still take them a little bit early without having to grab them 2 rounds ahead of where they should be going. Don't be the Las Vegas Raiders or the Philadelphia Eagles of your fantasy football league is what I'm saying. The 6th mistake is one that can absolutely cripple you, even if you think you've drafted a killer team. That's not knowing your league settings, your league scoring, or the roster format. You can't go into every draft and take the same approach as you did in the one before that. Some of them are going to have a standard quarterback, 2 running back, 2 receiver, 1 tight end, and a flex. Another one's going to have a 3 wide receiver setup where you got 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and a flex. Whereas if you go wide receiver heavy early in the rounds, it makes more sense than doing that in another league. Some of them might be a tight end premium league or super flex. You're going to know most of that stuff, but understand what your roster looks like, what the settings look like, how deep your bench is. And another big thing is, does your league have bonuses? Is there anything that people don't know about, or that if you don't know about is going to really put you in a jam? Because you could look at a team and say, man, this is really good, until you realize that the roster that you've constructed just isn't built to fit the settings and the scoring of the league. It's a really big one, and not many people talk about it. The 7th mistake, and I mentioned this earlier in the video, after doing a bunch of mock drafts, I've come to the conclusion that if you are not looking at these pre-draft rankings, especially if you're drafting, right now and in early it's not October and it's not early, it's mid-August. If you're drafting in mid-August, you're going to see some insane pre-draft rankings, or the way that the players are ordered on sites like Yahoo. I mean, Michael Gallup went, I think, at 125. Michael Thomas was past 120. There are Russell Gage went at 130. These guys are just being completely ignored. And if you go somewhere like Underdog Fantasy, which is best ball, surely it's a different format, but it has very sharp ADP. I'm watching some of these players go 5, 6, 7 rounds after where they're being drafted on Underdog. It's crazy. Take a look at those pre-draft rankings. Identify players that you think people in your league might just completely miss, and do some mock drafts while you're at it. Before you go into these drafts, do some mock drafts. Set yourself up to know what you're getting into, to know where players are going, and to know what players might be slipping through the cracks. It's very simply put. If you're not adjusting those rankings yourself, use rankings. Go to Awesemo.com, take our consensus rankings, take Awesemo himself, take his rankings, whatever you have to do in order to put yourself in a good position where you're not relying on the crap that is fed to you on some of these drafting sites, because it will get you into some serious trouble if you're going into a draft blind. The 8th mistake might not even be a mistake, but more of just an unnecessary nuisance that you think you need to pay attention to when you really don't, and that is bye weeks. Very simply, who cares? Who cares? If you have 5 guys that have the same bye week, all right, that sucks for week 6. But outside of that, now, assuming they're healthy, you get these guys back for every single game, for every single week, right? So you got a bunch of your top starters that are out for 1 week. You probably take an L. You're not going to win every week. But now, every time someone has to face you, you've got all of your best players in there, save for 1 or 2 that didn't have the same bye week. The biggest thing isn't necessarily, I don't want to have them on the same bye week because it's going to kill me and I lose that week. It's more so when you're drafting and you're not taking a player because of that, look at what it does to your strategy. Now you're drafting someone that's probably projected for less fantasy points, that might not be as good of an actual pick, and you're taking him because you're afraid of a bye week that's going to put you in a bad spot for 1 week, right? Hell, I actually don't even mind it if it wipes out 1 week, and that's not even a guarantee. If you draft a good bench, you can still win these weeks. It's not a guaranteed loss. But if you have 1 week where you're at a disadvantage because you have a bunch of really good players because you had a good draft and you followed all of these mistakes to not make, who cares? Very simple. Mistake number 9. Again, is it a mistake? No, but it's not necessary to do, and that's drafting handcuffs. I know a lot of people are just conditioned, right, over all of the years of playing fantasy football and home leagues and whatever it is, to be like, man, I gotta get my handcuff. I gotta handcuff my top 2 backs. You really don't. When you think about it, if you have a deep bench, you can go ahead and do that if you want. I still don't think it's necessary. I'd actually rather grab handcuffs. I'd rather snipe handcuffs from other players, from other people in my league, from their top backs. Because if your top back stays healthy and theirs doesn't, and you snipe Alexander Madison from the guy who has Dalvin Cook, now you're starting Alvin Kamara and Alexander Madison every single week, which is just phenomenal. But really, when it comes to handcuffs, if you have a short bench, like let's say a standard 6-man bench, maybe 7, you're throwing a spot away. You're just essentially throwing a bench spot away for the entire season on the odd hope that maybe you'll be able to use it. Now, granted, you don't want to use them. It's an insurance policy. But even if it does play out that way and you were right, you still lost your 1st or 2nd round pick. So you're losing your top pick anyway. You're replacing him with a backup that, could be good, like a Tony Pollard, a Madison, a Latavius Murray. Those guys would all be very good in the event that your starter went down. But the likelihood that happens, it's low, and you can't predict it. So I'd rather not try to predict it and grab handcuffs from other guys, because then I put myself in legitimate league winning territory. That's a really great thing to apply for best ball leagues. But even in your redraft leagues, don't feel like you have to grab early and reach for a handcuff on your own player. And now you only have 5 viable bench spots all season long. The 10th and final mistake is putting way too much stock into the preseason, into training camp, and into coach speak. I'm not saying this can't be valuable, right? I think it can be valuable to some extent. For example, I'll never forget 2010, Arian Foster in the preseason. Arian Foster had a huge game or two in the preseason, shot up everyone's radar, and if you landed him, you had a huge, it was like 1,600 yards in the year. I think he had 16 rushing touchdowns. I was actually looking at him before I recorded this video. He put up 3 huge seasons in a row. He had 41 rushing touchdowns in 3 seasons. Huge pass catching upside, monster rushing upside. This was a guy that was undrafted for a number of reasons, and we didn't even not discover him, but we didn't even know he would have a role, let alone be the starter, until the preseason. That's valuable. Training camp can be valuable, because if you're looking at positional battles and all of that stuff, who's getting the bulk of the reps. But an instance, and I've got a great example for you where it just makes things worse, is Jalen Reagor of the Philadelphia Eagles makes this amazing catch towards the pylon at training camp. They got a video of it. It goes out everywhere. We're crowning him as the next, Michael Irvin. I shouldn't say that. I can't use a Cowboys player. The problem is we never have any good receivers for the Eagles, so I can't use one. But everyone's crowning him. Man, did you see that catch? It's going to be a big season for Jalen Reagor. Devonta Smith is out right now. He's still hurt. It's going to be a big year. But what about the fact that the whole training camp, for the most part, all reports suggest that he has been objectively bad. Okay? I heard and I read on the same day that he made that catch, he got chewed out by 3 different coaches on the same day. So you could see an amazing catch, whether it's him or Brian Edwards, no matter who it is, because he had a sick one as well. None of that matters if it's just one big catch. Anyone can make one big play. It doesn't matter. So be very cautious about that. Be very cautious about coach speak. Bill Belichick talked up Damian Harris the other day, and the media went wild. Belichick never talks up his running backs. This must mean a bell cow season for Damian Harris. Come on. Temper your expectations. Be careful about that. Use the preseason coach speak and training camp in a way that benefits you, but bring some nuance to the table when you do it, and you won't get yourself in trouble. Let the other players in your league reach on Jalen Reagor because he made a sick catch in a meaningless practice during training camp in early August. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always. Hopefully this helped. Top 10 mistakes to avoid when you're drafting. Don't show this one to your friends. Let them make all these mistakes. Let them screw the draft up while you're picking the best players in each and every round. I'm Dave Loughran. Hit me up at Loughy_D on Twitter, Loughy_D, and we'll catch you back here for the next one. Peace.